This episode of Truth Table is brought to you by 10 by 10, a movement dedicated to helping faith matter more to 10 million young people over the next 10 years. Through innovative resources and collaborative efforts, 10 by 10 supports youth discipleship across diverse communities. Visit 1010.org and follow at 10 by 10 Collab on social media to learn more and join the movement. Sisters, how y'all feel? Brothers, y'all all right? If this is your first time at Truth Table, welcome to the table. And if you've been sitting at the table with us all these years, we are so grateful that you have been listening to us through these years, and we are inviting you to partner with us and support our work at patreon.com/truthstable. Now pull up a chair and have a seat at the table with us. Hey y'all, welcome to Truth Table, Midwives of Culture for Grace and Truth. I'm Ekemini.
And I'm Christina.
This table is built by Black women and for Black women. So welcome to the table, C. How you doing? Good?
I feel welcomed. And I'm at the table. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Glad to be here with you back at the table.
Listen. And we are dressed down. We're dressed youthful.
Youthful.
For those who are watching the videos. See, there's a different experience for those who just listen, but those who observe the videos, they get to experience what is the ensemble related to the topic. And we are dressed youthfully today. Casual
sporty
young.
Chic. Call me Sporty Spice.
Listen, hello. Please call me that. So.
No, but we are also joined at the table with Cody Q Balfour.
Come on now.
That's
Heavy on that Q.
I was about to say the Q.
Yes. We're here to talk about youth discipleship, the youths.
Come on. Also known as the youths.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And so, discipleship is actually very near and dear to our heart. And we will actually do an episode on that. And we have had past episodes about discipleship. And so we thought it would be great to have Pastor Cody, actually, join us at the table to talk about youth discipleship. But let me tell you a little something about Cody Q Balfour, just in case you don't know who he is. Cody is a native of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a descendant of Tulsa race massacre survivors. He holds a bachelor's in theology and biblical studies from Welch College in Nashville, Tennessee. And he currently serves on Nashville staff at Koinonia Church, a congregation whose practice is fostering a place of safe belonging among various racial groups, uniting under the banner of Jesus.
Amen.
Welcome to the table,
Amen.
Cody.
Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. I mean, my gosh, youth discipleship.
Yes.
What's going on with the youth?
Oh man.
What a question.
I know.
Happening?
A lot.
There was no
What's going on?
Listen, it was like, fix it for us.
Yes, right. I wish I could.
Who you work with? Is it Gen Alpha to what? Okay, Gen Alpha.
Tell us about your work.
Yeah. So, for the past probably ever since 2017, I've been working with different Gen Zers and Gen Alpha and things like that, and people before. So when I was in Tulsa, I was working more so with kids that were not churched and that were really from the community. And currently it's more so church kids, even though we're trying to reach more out to the community. And so there's very different dynamics of things that these kids struggle with. And then some commonalities, and insecurities that we all have and things like that. But that's kind of how long I've been working kind of like full-time youth ministry, student ministry and things like that. And then before that in college, I worked with students, volunteered, I worked at church camps and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of what I do now is I'm a youth pastor. But it's kind of looked different at different stages. But it's changed. It's changed quite a bit.
Yeah. And I would say I think you're a great youth pastor.
Oh, thank you.
Because you work with two of my youths. And if you weren't, I wouldn't have you work with.
They are sweet. They're special.
But they always have really wonderful things to say. Especially my oldest, she's got much to say about how she has been, she wouldn't use the word discipled, but kind of the experience and what she has learned.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. God. And me and her have personality connections. So we like a lot of the same things.
Oh yeah. My oldest is quite quirky. She's quite quirky. I love her like that.
Yeah.
Well, I look at youth ministry and youth pastors as a really unique and special gift to the life of the church. And yet oftentimes I think they can be treated as unimportant or just, like the professional babysitters, and
Yeah.
there are just ways in which I think we can dishonor God by dishonoring this particular work. And so, what are some things that you wish people understood about the importance of youth discipleship and the work of youth pastors in the local church context?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of two things. So the first one is that our youth are the church now, not in the future. You know, it's not the future church. It's kind of something we say at Koinonia a lot because when you begin to treat people as if they are kind of human beings in waiting, you can really marginalize them and mistreat them, and even unintentionally. And then the second is that youth ministry really is pastoral ministry. In many ways, like especially when I was back in Tulsa, the amount of times I've had to visit a student's house and visit their parents. This is a pastor would go on a hospital visit, you know, and take them home and pick them up and care for them in certain ways with their, guardian's permission, of course, but and to act as a guardian sometimes. One of the things we say at Koinonia is that, minors and babies and children and students, they really are the most vulnerable population, no matter where you go, no matter what race you are, gender, wherever you go in the world, they are the most vulnerable.
Yes.
And so, which means we have to take extra care of them and look after them in ways we might not have to, kind of hold the hand of an adult. And things like that. And the Lord tells us like the most vulnerable, they're very near and dear to his heart. So when you begin really mistreating or even just neglecting, even unintentionally neglecting students, you really are mistreating people who are close to God's heart, particularly. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Sobering reminder.
Yeah. Cody, you talked about working, with youth since 2017 on church, and the church, church kids. I'm curious about the differences that you've observed among the unchurched and the church kids. What are the commonalities? What are the differences that you've noticed?
I think the commonalities are, and I think this is something that sometimes we point at students, but this is true really of adults as well, but it's a sense of belonging. And a deep insecurity, a deep longing to like, I want to belong. I want to be a part of a group. As where you get older, you still want that, but you're not trying to, I'm 31 now. I'm not trying to press anybody, anymore. You get older, you're like, I don't care if people think I'm cool. But the time, being thought of as cool or whatever is really a cry for belonging.
Yes.
It's not, that's right. That's right. It's not just popularity contests. So those are commonalities. The differences are like when I would work with a lot of the kids from the community who are coming from unchurched backgrounds, they don't hide their sin very well, and they're not trying to. They have been taught to, that they've been taught like this, to wear it on their sleeve, they haven't really been taught the behavior modification.
The filter.
That's right. And that can be a currency as well. If I behave, then I'm accepted. And so a lot of them are like that's not their thing, as where that is the thing when you've been in church, sadly, is it teach, sometimes we teach our kids behavior modification rather than grace and being formed organically by the scriptures and by the church. And then, there seems to be, and just in my experience with community kids, there seems to be really an unfiltered access to different expressions of sexual addiction and pornography and things like that. And again, it's not that you don't see those within the church, but often, when you have church kids that have parents, they're kind of monitoring some of those things as where, and just in my experience, working with kids that are, living across the street from the community center that I worked at, there's no one monitoring not only their online activity, but like their activity in general. And so they're exposed to a lot of things. There's at least visibly, there's a lot more trauma. I had a student, that who experienced, he saw a murder and then like hid in the closet and escaped, and I was wondering why he was just so agitated. I was like, man, what's going on with you? And he had told me that he had saw that happen. And I was just like, what, sorry not to get too heavy, but it's a different ball game. But again, that doesn't mean, that church kids are any less broken either,
That's right. That's right. or kind of under attack.
That's right.
In some different ways. And maybe that's the language I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, some of the threats that are coming against our young people, some of the some of the forces, some of the temptations, and that can be from a spiritual standpoint, it can be social, political, but I sense, or at least in my work, I have seen just this incredibly unfair burden that Gen Alpha and Gen Z have. That and every generation talks about, their generation is like, this was the hard one, kiddos, But I think that there are just some unique dynamics for Z and Alpha that no other generation in history can even touch or talk about, just in terms of resources and internet, you name it. So what would you say some of these threats are that we should be aware of?
So I think one of them is something you mentioned, is being born into social media. I didn't get into social media until I was a young man, and still I'm like, I gotta get off this thing. Sometime, I'm like, I gotta get away from this somehow. But being born into it is a wholly different, different thing when you're
from the womb.
Yes. Yeah. This is all like you are not older than Facebook. Or X, formerly known as Twitter, and so when this is all it's probably even harder for some of our young people to imagine life without social media. Because we can imagine that, because that was the reality for us at one point in our lives. Yes. So our imaginations are just a little bit different. I think that where Gen Z and Gen Alpha have a lot of pressure politically to save us. And that's one thing that I hear a lot.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, don't get me wrong, I want us to be saved from this current political mess. This is not their job to save us, because first of all, we're the ones kind of made this mess, and so it's like we might need to try to get ourselves out of this and not push it onto them who did not ask for this and who did not create it. And and again, I'm not saying they have no political agency or anything like that, but I hear this all the time, especially online, is Gen Z will save us and Gen Alpha will save us, and I'm like, we need to help them because they're struggling with some things that might not really be.
And we owe them.
That's right. That's right. Like we owe them a better world than the one that we have made. And so, even just from a political standpoint.
Super helpful. Super helpful. I think, especially what you lift up, I didn't think about that as an additional pressure to save.
That's right.
The generation of your parents or your grandparents, and that makes a whole lot of sense when you think about the way in which justice is so deeply important to this generation, in ways that are incredibly important and helpful, but also in ways that sometimes feel a little legalistic. As an outsider,
I call it social legalism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of social justice.
Talk about that. Can you define that? Or how do you?
Yeah. So social legalism is just a social justice version of legalism, in which that if I don't live up to whichever person's or group's ideology of what justice is, well, then now I'm excommunicated from that community and I'm no longer in. So I have to earn my way in. And so what that also produces is a lot of slacktivism, produces a lot of allies who aren't really allies, who are not really in solidarity. They're just trying to belong. It really takes advantage of our desire to belong and says you have to earn this.
Yeah.
And if you don't live up to it, you're out. And so I call it social legalism.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, that is good. I'm curious about among Gen Alpha and Gen Z. Well, first of all, why do you feel that youth discipleship is important for this next generation? And what gives you hope? What are you seeing? What hopeful trends are you observing among Gen Alpha and Gen Z that differ from millennials and X and boomers?
This is some of my favorite stuff to talk about. I'm really passionate about spiritual formation among our youth, among our students, because of the lack of discipleship that I had, or the lack of discipleship that I see among adults, and who did grow up in the church, but there's actually no real discipleship.
Come on.
And so I'm like, I don't want that to continue. Because I think the reason evangelicalism has really taken on this whole other gospel that's not Christianity is because they have not been discipled in the scriptures. and in holiness. So, which is why when we see this backlash, right, against talk of, anti-racism, things like that, well, that's a discipleship issue. That and we've seen this too. So like when you begin to preach the Bible and the 1,000 times the Bible talks about justice and people are offended by that, that's a discipleship issue, because you should know that.
That's right.
Because I'm talking about, like, that's just read it, right?
The character of God.
That's right. It's the character of God.
Absolutely.
And so when people when people who call themselves people of the Bible have a backlash against the Bible, that's that's a discipleship issue. And so luckily the younger folks don't have that baggage as much.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope for that, is they actually don't have some of that baggage that sometimes we kind of grew up with.
Yeah, they're already ready.
That's right.
With regard to the justice.
That's right. Okay. And so because Christianity has kind of been in bed with power in America and has created this nationalistic, Christian nationalistic power structure that has become legalistic in much of evangelicalism, because now we're living in a more secularized society. And there's pros and cons to that, but they just don't have that baggage, yet. Okay. And so, which means there's certain walls we're not having to push down for them, because, and I will say this too, and this is what gives me hope. Gen Z and Gen Alpha really are not ashamed to say they want to belong. As where I feel like for me, when I was younger, you never, especially as a man, you never say you want to have friends. Like, would you be my friend?
Yeah.
That's like, no, you'd never say that. And I heard a little boy, a 10-year-old boy, say it at our church. And I almost cried. I was like, yes, I wish I could have said that. And he said it, I mean, no insecurity, nothing. He asked, would you be my friend? And I love that. So there's a little bit of a wall that's not so there. Sweet. Yeah. Yeah. So there's pros and cons, people, different generations.
Did they say yes?
They did. I think it almost made them cry. I know. Because they were like, that was so sweet. Yeah. It was a little black boy, and I was like, oh, this is healing. This is healing little Cody, because I wish, as a young black boy, I wish I had that freedom. Yeah. That I felt that freedom. Oh, and this is a little boy who's raised by, black parents who love the Lord. I'm just like, yes, you guys are killing it.
That is wonderful. That is really encouraging. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, and to your point about these segments of the church that really don't know the God of the Bible. That's right. Or the Bible at all. And that's so when people open it up and begin to talk about the character of God and the way that God is a God of justice, it's offensive to them. Yeah. But I also wonder if in your work you've had the opportunity to help a generation who knows that justice is a good thing and is longing for some expression of justice, helping them to connect the dots so that actually is at the heart of God.
Yes, yes.
And can you just give us maybe an example of maybe how you've seen that at play, or how helping young people to connect the dots to this idea of justice isn't something that you just got from school, or something or a protest, and all those things could be good and important, but it actually is a part of the character and heart of God.
Yeah. So one of the things I tried to do at our church here, and then I tried to do with my students back in Tulsa, is I really tried to preach an overview of the Bible and obviously talk about justice, but really frame justice as like God is making things right. Yes. Like, don't we all desire for things to be right? And they're like, of course. And I'm like, well, that's actually what the whole Bible's about. Like, the whole Bible is about justice. Come on. It's not just one of those, categories. And Jesus even says it is the weightier matters of the law, right? Right. So Jesus says there are some things in the Bible that are more important than other things in the Bible. Yes. And justice is one of those things. Yes. Right. And so they don't really have a hard time connecting that. I think what I'm seeing in some students is they will easily accept that, but then sometimes it gets swatted away by their parents because that's not how their parents think. Because their parents have been told, well, the goal of the Bible is redemption, and absolutely it is, or some other kind of topic. Yeah. But they sometimes they will kind of butt up against that, and it's really hard to get people to put that lens on and to keep it on and be like, this is actually the lens through which you should see the world. And so again, it is a little bit easier for our younger people, but But yeah, I try to do like an overview of 6 weeks of like beginning to end. This is what the Bible is about. Mm-hmm. And even if one night is not the topic of justice, I'll weave it in there because it's almost always related. Like on every page of scripture, someone's being mistreated, right? Someone's being,
people been cutting up since.
That's right.
The people been
like,
sin is sinning.
Something unjust is happening. And so what it also means too is trying to use a narrative with students and to show them that interpreting the Bible is not just, well, let's go to Romans and see like kind of a didactic one-liner that describes something. That's not the only way the Bible talks. This is an ancient story. Amen. Yeah. And so the Bible is demonstrating justice to us on every page. That's right. And so I'm trying to teach them the difference between verbalization and demonstration. Yes. And the Bible is not just verbalizing things, it is showing you.
Yeah. So yes.
That's good. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Cody. This has been really enlightening and encouraging, So let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we've got some more questions for Cody. So don't go nowhere, y'all. We're still talking about youth discipleship with Cody Balfour. 10 by 10 is a movement committed to working together with churches, denominations, and Christian organizations to create a healthier Christian ecosystem where young people's faith can thrive. 10 by 10 focuses on providing the resources that faith communities need to prioritize youth discipleship. By working collaboratively with over 100 organizations, 10 by 10 aims to raise youth discipleship to a top priority for ministry leaders. Visit 1010.org and follow at 10 by 10 Collab on social media to learn more. Together, we can inspire and uplift the next generation in their faith journey. And we are back at the table with Cody Q. Balfour. And I bet you didn't know that in addition to being a youth pastor, Cody is an author.
Come on now. Come on, Cody.
He has written a book entitled Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And because I'm a child of the 90s, I almost said, are you afraid of the dark? That's right. But I exercise some self-control.
Listen, I'm telling you.
You took me back to Goosebumps. Yeah. I love the title. I love the title.
I couldn't watch that. I saw an episode where I saw this kid get out of a tank of goo. I said, I'm done.
Of goo.
There was a lot of goo in the 90s. The 90s had a lot of goo. There was slime.
Yes.
Goo.
Yes.
It was common.
And it was orange, and I'm like, what is that?
Either orange or green. It's going down.
Triangles, sinking
I just went straight back to Rugrats. I was like, I can handle these babies.
That's so funny.
You know what I'm saying? It could be Rugrats instead.
No, but that's so funny. So what was, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. It is not out yet, but people can pre-order it.
They cannot.
Tell the people.
That's right. You can order the day it comes out and order it wherever you get books.
And when does it come out?
July 23rd.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
July 23rd.
So why? Okay, I love the title. What inspired that? Why? Why this book? Why now?
Yes. So one of them, and I've heard you guys talk about this as well, but we're all seeing politically and in many different ways when it comes to race, politics, even sex, we're seeing anxiety-induced responses and expressions of all these things. Right. I'm going to act this way because I'm afraid or I'm anxious. And I'm like, well, the Bible talks about that everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I was looking for devotionals because, I've read through the Bible, but sometimes I'm like, sometimes I just need something a little bit smaller, more accessible for the day. And I could not really find a devotional that talked about fear and anxiety as it's linked to sin and oppression. Mm-hmm. It's always like, kind of personal anxiety, which is great. Like we need those resources. But I kept seeing this theme in the scriptures as I was reading the Bible of all these horrible things happening because some person in power is anxious. Yeah. Yes. And I really was inspired by this. My friend Miriam, she helped me edit the book, but she's one of my favorite preachers, and she preached a sermon called, I think it's called The Anxiety of Egypt. And it's all about how Pharaoh is anxious. He's afraid of the Hebrews. So what does he do? He enslaves them, right?
That's right.
That's really the whole premise of the book.
That's right.
And there's about 54 devotional entries that go through different points in the Bible where you see, Herod is afraid. There's the new king. He's going to come and overthrow me. So I'm going to slaughter these babies.
That's right.
And I even go back to the Garden of Eden. I think when Adam and Eve eat the fruit, that's an anxious response, right? That's them saying, I'm afraid that God is not who he said he is. Or I'm afraid that God is not good. So I'm going to take this for myself. And so the book is basically a devotional that links fear and anxiety to sin and oppression. Yeah. We sin because we're anxious, and we harm people often when we're anxious.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So heavy, so weighty, and so
Yeah.
true and timely, right? And
Yeah.
so, as you think about the reader for this book, who do you imagine, or who do you hope to pick it up?
Yeah.
And what do you hope will be transformed in them or in their lives when they get to that last page of this devotion?
Yeah. I would love for everyone to pick up this book, but as far as who's in my mind as I'm writing, I would definitely like younger folks to read this, just because, when you, this is not the worst our country's ever been, of course, politically, but
come on, tell the truth.
there is a certain,
not great though.
This might be one of the most anxious times
That's right.
for our country,
That's right.
especially for young people, when you kind of grow up in this thing, and you have the rise of Trump and all these different just horrible groups that don't like people who are not white male, right?
Right.
And so I'm really thinking of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, really thinking of young people and Black folks as well, because I've looked everywhere, and there are just not a lot of Black devotions written by Black folks.
That's right.
Especially Black men, and that's who I'm thinking of as well, is young Black men, and giving them something to read that really even helps us uncover some of our anxiety, some of our insecurity, so that we can even love Black women better. So.
Well, we certainly support that. We agree wholeheartedly. Right there.
Yeah. And I want it to be a book of hope. I talk about fear and anxiety, but I really want to talk about how God meets us in that. That's why I call it "Don't Be Afraid of the Dark," is because as 2024 election comes, and as things, you have the manosphere, you have all these things that are just really saying and spewing harmful things, and they're discipling people.
Yes, they are.
They're discipling people
powerfully
in this harm. And so that is the dark to me. That's the darkness. That is the dark. And so that's why I call my book "Don't Be Afraid of the Dark," is because God, this is his specialty, right?
Yes.
Like he is a professional at our anxiety.
That's right. That's right.
And so when God meets us in our anxiety, not only are we able to be healed from sin, but we are less prone to oppress other people.
That's right.
Right. That's right. And I see this so much in just all these different categories.
Yeah. No, super helpful.
Yeah. Was reading your book and just knowing, your work and your ministry with the youth, I was thinking about, just the rising identity crisis among the youth, Gen Alpha, Gen Z. The demographics, the data suggests that about a third, of about Gen Z identifies somewhere on the LGBTQI spectrum. And so I'm curious about the ways in which "Don't Be Afraid of the Dark" speaks to, and it's not just people got all types of identity issues that are not on that spectrum either.
No, absolutely.
Let me say that very clearly. But I'm curious about the ways that your book, this devotional, speaks to our identity, right? Speaks to our identity as Black youth or Black women, however, wherever we find ourselves based on our social location. How does it help to anchor people's identity? Because it just seems to be a real struggle from what I've observed.
Absolutely.
There's a real identity
I think there's data to back that up. I think because of the mass exodus that has been happening within churches in America, and I think there's been data on this as well, but when people tend to decrease their identity in their religious belief, well, then they're going to put that somewhere else. Sure. They're going to put that in their politics. So that's why I think our politics is so just dark and heavy right now, is because I think we're seeing an unusual amount of people cover themselves in political identity. That's right. And I think that's what younger people are kind of prone to do a little bit, is like, my identity is in my sexuality, or my identity is this political ideology or whatever. And that's going to be like my thing. Right. And so, but the thing is, those idols are cruel masters. And so I talk about in my book how the idolatry of trying to really put the weight and place your identity in those things is a cruel master, but it's an anxiety response. Yeah. It's like, I'm afraid or I'm alone, so let me gravitate towards this thing. Let me cover myself in this particular thing or ideology or sexual expression or whatever. And it is a cruel master. And because your idols do not love you. And when you're really able to meet that with the scriptures and say, actually, God, that is your identity, is in the Lord.
Yeah.
And in God's community, sometimes when Christians speak of identity, they speak on a very individualistic plane. But if your identity is twofold, if it's in your personal relationship with God and in your community, then what that does is it gives you a safe place, a place to belong. Because when our identity gets shaken, right, in the Lord, well, we need our community to come and remind us, this is who you are. You're not what the world says that you are. So I try to speak to that in the book.
Yeah, great.
I mean, there is so much fear about whether it's identity, whether it's about getting something wrong, about not being accepted. I mean,
that's the theme.
I find the clear naming of one of our deep core issues to be really important in this book, and that it is met with the reassurance and the peace-giving word of God over and over and over again is what happens in this devotion. How do you see the gospel uniquely being an antidote to our deepest fears of getting it wrong, fears of not having the right identity, fears of not being good enough? How is the gospel uniquely set up to bring peace to our very fearful hearts?
Yeah. So one of the things I talk about in the book is there's a devotion called Presence, and it's really about the presence of God. And one of the things the Bible does is, I don't care what anybody says, the Bible does not tell you why there's suffering, right? Like the problem of suffering. God does not explain that. And that's a mystery, and it's something we wrestle with. But I actually think he offers something better, which is he constantly says, I'm with you.
Right.
And you would be surprised at how the presence of God and the presence of people will really meet so many of those needs. When I was in high school, I got into a car accident with my best friend, Devontae. And who's still my best friend. He was my best man at my wedding. And it was my fault. And it was an accident that put him in the hospital for a month. And he was in a coma for 2 weeks. And I remember, I still have a little bit PTSD from that experience. But I remember seeing his mother, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot face this woman, and I knew his mom loved her. I'm like, how do I tell her this is my fault? And I hurt her son. But one thing I realized over time is that what she needed in that moment wasn't really an explanation. She needed people to be around her. And I really, truly believe that's what the Bible is doing. Instead of, imagine if God were just to say, this is why this happened. Well, that does nothing. This explains the problem.
Yeah, knowledge doesn't bring peace.
That's right. But when God says, I'm with you, God gives us a person in Jesus to come down and be with us. That he pitched his tent among us. He tabernacled among us. And that really seems to be the answer that God gives over and over and over again to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Moses, even to Jesus. I am with you. And Jesus says it to his disciples, to the ends of the earth. And because we're communal beings at our core, we're not primarily cognitive beings. We are emotive communal beings. It makes perfect sense that this communal God, this triune God, meets us and says, I'm with you to the end. And you even see that with Samson, as horrible as Samson is in many ways. God is with him at the very end of his story, and that is a very beautiful thing. And I really think it's the presence of the Lord and understanding that from beginning to the end of Scripture. But that is a huge theme that meets us.
No, I think that is great. God is Emmanuel, God with us.
That's right. That's right.
God with us.
This is no small theme in the Bible.
I know it's not. Not at all. We need to know that now in these dark times.
Yeah,
that's right.
And so many moments of God, literally, not like esoterically, but literally coming and getting us.
That's right.
Literally walking through the garden in the cool of the day.
That's right.
Literally coming to earth in the form of an infant to endure and bear everything.
And we'll literally come back.
And we'll literally come back. literally come back, right?
That's right.
To judge the living and the dead
right.
is the text, right? So I think that theme of, where we may not have answers, we have presence. And that is a deep, deep comfort.
Yeah. Cody, I'm curious about, I think it's still related, but when we talk about, don't be afraid of the dark, we talk about, the world and what's going on, and what's happening in our world, or maybe even the dark places, maybe in our own lives, right? Because we are still being sanctified.
Oh, that's right.
For sure.
The darkness is not just out there. It can be here
oh my goodness. Yeah. The reason why the darkness is out there is because it's in here.
That's right.
We don't talk about that enough.
That's right.
I'm actually curious about what does it look like to reach this generation with the light? The light of hope, the light of truth, through evangelism, right? And I wonder if this book might be a way to address the felt needs, of the youth, and particularly in Gen A. I'm sorry, well, I guess it's Gen A, but Gen Alpha, and Gen Z. I wonder if this might be an on-ramp. Are there some ways in which you can see this as an on-ramp into introducing Christ, to those who are not yet believers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you could totally. One of the things I'm passionate about, just in Christian publishing in general, is like we need to write more accessibly to people. Yes. Especially as we're secularizing even more, there's so many young people that they do not have the frame of reference that we grew up. Like I didn't grow up in the church, but I grew up in a church city.
Yeah.
So like I had a great knowledge of the Bible and Jesus just by being in proximity in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah. That's not the case anymore. And so I try to write this in such a way where you could hand it to a student.
That's good.
And it really goes to the whole story of the Bible. And that's kind of how I try to write it as well. I'm a big believer that like there needs to be familiarity with the story of Scripture, not just themes, even though themes are helpful at certain points, but just a foundational knowledge of the story. But as far as evangelism for young people, I think I found the most helpful method of evangelism is serving with young people and letting that be a doorway to be like, well, why are you doing this? As opposed to, well, let me just tell you about Jesus in Walmart. It's like, well, the Western politics and evangelicalism has tainted the name of Jesus so much that just walking up to somebody and evangelizing in a traditional method. And I'm sure there's times for that. I don't want to shake that at all, but that's not, in my experience, that's not really what's gonna, that's immediately going to be like, oh no, they're going to think you're an evangelical. And not just theologically, they think you're evangelical politically. And that's something I'm not willing to be associated with, but if I serve with people and then that becomes the gateway to talk about Jesus and for them to see that like, oh, I'm actually like living this.
Yeah.
Because we see all the time and they're seeing it probably even more, which is this rampant hypocrisy within the Western church. Yeah. And they're like, I want nothing to do with that. And so the greatest antidote to hypocrisy is faithfulness. So, so it's like, show them your faithfulness. That's right. Integrity, serving, caring for the poor, caring for the least of these, and the vulnerable and the marginalized. So that's going to be your best bet is they're going to see Jesus through that. And then you do talk about him. Like we're not ashamed, of talking about Jesus.
Yeah, and even protecting the dignity and safety of those who don't agree with.
Yeah, right. and there is, forget the name of it. I think the name is Michael Green, but he has a book on evangelism where he talks about how in the first century, he talks about 80% of evangelism was the way they lived. 80%.
Yeah, it was so countercultural.
That's right. It's like you can't just So it's like, what's going on? We might need to give it back to somebody. Like I feel like it's flipped. It's like now it's like 80% we're just talking and 20%,
Yeah. Well, maybe using talking not to do doing.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Where they didn't have the luxury back then to do that. But yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for taking a seat at the table with us. We learned so much, about youth discipleship among Generation Alpha and Generation Z. I am hopeful and hope-filled, about what is going to
it's very hopeful.
I think a true authentic faith is bubbling up around among that generation.
I see it in our students at Koinonia. I really see some authenticity. There's just some baggage they don't have yet.
Yeah.
And I love that.
They don't get, yeah.
I love that. As where, some of us grew up in a very Christian, culture, even just, not just theologically, but socially. Right? Church camps, youth conferences, all that stuff like that. A lot of kids didn't grow up with that. So they really, I think, have the pleasure of meeting Jesus. For real, and meeting him, not meeting Barabbas,
or his complicated representative.
That's right. Hello? No, that's right.
Yeah, hello.
So it is very exciting.
Amen.
That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking a seat at the table with us. And of course, talk to our listeners. Let them know again where they can buy your book, when they can buy it.
Yes, you can buy it
on social media.
That's right. Yeah, I'm. My name is Cody Balfour. I'm at my social media is just my name, Cody Q Balfour on Instagram. It's similar on Twitter, and also Threads. If you're on Threads, I don't know if you guys are on Threads or not, but I feel it to be more peaceful than Twitter, whatever.
I'm a little resistant to new things.
Oh, for sure. Like listen, it can go south at any time, But yeah, I'm on Instagram as well. You just type in my name, and then my book can be bought. It'll be be bought at Barnes and Nobles, Google Books, Apple Books, really anywhere you can buy a book online.
Wonderful.
So please get it. I'd love to bless people with this book.
Yes.
Well, congratulations on this new book.
And thank you guys. Ekemini wrote an endorsement and Dr. Christina wrote the foreword. So seriously, thank you for doing that. I mean, that alone was amazing, but to even be brought on this amazing podcast,
of course,
is such a blessing. So.
Yeah, we want to make sure this book gets into as many hands as possible.
Yes.
It will really
thank you.
Bring a great deal of peace.
Thank you. You both have contributed to it, and I'm just so thankful.
Yeah, no, we're grateful for you. Well, thank you so much for taking a seat at the table with us. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for taking a seat at the table with us. So let's keep the conversation going. Tweet. Well, we're eliminating Twitter, but okay.
That's right. I won't mention it again.
Okay, whatever. Tweet us your thoughts, or drop your comments on Instagram, Facebook, or you can email us your thoughts about this episode with Cody Balfour about youth discipleship and his book, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Our email is askthetruthstable@gmail.com. And also follow our podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, all of the things. And we're also on YouTube. Go ahead and follow us there. Everything's at Truth Table. Okay. So thank y'all for taking a seat at the table with us. We have been your hosts, Ekemini
and Christina.
We'll see you soon on the next Truth Table. Bye, y'all.